Sean, my
Well,
person.
yes. How are you? Well,
Oh man,
I do identify as a man, so you could say my man.
I was just trying to be different, but my man, I appreciate
Okay.
it.
All right. I didn't know if you were trying to be woke
No,
or
I was not trying to be
politically
woke. I
correct.
just was
Okay.
trying to switch it up.
Yes.
I'm doing good though, man. I'm doing good. It's winding down on Women's History Month, and
Yes.
the other big global event was the start of Ramadan, which I think was
That's correct.
yesterday or the day before. But
I think it was yesterday.
so neither of which I am directly impacted by, other than the work I just continue to do around this equity and inclusion stuff.
Yeah.
Being that I don't identify as a woman and I am not also a Muslim, but certainly indirectly in celebrating with my friends and as myself with those friends, particularly with Women's History or Heritage Month here in the U.S. So
Yeah.
a lot of great programming going on a number of
Good.
fronts that I was able to participate in. How about you?
Good. Yeah. I'm just rocking and rolling.
Good.
And good to see that most of my clients are doing something around Women's History Month.
Oh, good.
So there's a lot of good learning, and obviously much more to do.
Yeah.
So before we get into the topic, what are you drinking?
Hey, man, I thought you'd never ask. I found another bourbon surprise by
Nice.
Brow Brothers, Yarborough, shortened to Bro. I don't know how you say it. I've never heard it, but anyway, it is a black-owned distillery in Kentucky, Louisville.
Oh, nice.
Yes. So three brothers who all went off to the military and came home to Kentucky and decided to start a spirits company. So please check it out. BROUGH, dear listener, brothers, wherever you get your fine whiskey.
Yeah.
It's a little light for my taste. It is only 82 proof or so, at least the version that I have, but still very tasty. I got a nice bite to it, so I'm enjoying it.
Good. Well, I know sometimes you get after me
in a good way.
You're like,
in a good way.
because you have to one up me. That's what you say.
I do not, because you're always one upping me.
That's what I'm saying. No, you blame me for one upping you. So this time I am going to one up you. So
Excellent.
I did not know you were drinking, and because you drank Uncle Nearest the last podcast, I am drinking Uncle Nearest 1856, which has 100 proof. So that's where it's the one.
That is the best one, brother. It'll put you on your butt.
And listen, I've transitioned so much. I now have bourbon glasses and a big ice cube.
Damn, he got round ice cubes, dear listeners. We're gonna have to change the name of this podcast to Bourbon and Bold Conversations. I love it.
Well, and I have to have the ice cube because it's got to offset some of the strength.
Yeah, man, that 100 proof ain't no joke. I love the 1856.
Yeah, it's a bold.
So smooth.
And I also try to make a story, or I grab a story out of the air, and I'm going to connect this to our topic. I just thought about this.
Good.
Our topic for today is woke and wokeness. We're seeing more and more of that term being thrown around, and oftentimes not in a good way. But I'm connecting to Uncle Nearest because it's about something starting or being created by a Black person and then transitions into something else. So as you know, Uncle Nearest, or the Uncle Nearest, what was his name? God, I'm losing it.
No, it is his last name was Nearest. I cannot think of his first name at the moment.
I know. We're terrible.
We are.
But he helped, he taught Jack Daniels how to do the stuff. So like that transitioned, woke has kind of transitioned. Did that make sense? Was I able to do a parallel there?
No, it made perfect sense, right? It's
okay. All right.
it's a parallel, right? So no, it makes perfect sense. Nearest Green was his name, by the way.
Nearest Green, also known as
Yes.
Uncle Nearest.
Uncle Nearest, yes.
Which for those that don't know is a black-owned
Yes.
bourbon company.
Yes, and
Or
very good. So
would they say bourbon, or would it be a whiskey company?
Probably I would call it a spirits company.
All right,
but
See?
whiskey and bourbon for some people are kind of interchangeable.
Yes. Okay.
And
Well,
we had that conversation with Shay, but anyway.
That's right. I'm glad we got through that. So I've been curious about this whole thing about woke and wokeness.
Yeah.
And it just seems to keep building. And so I'm curious about what you think about, or what you think about that term woke or wokeness, or the terms.
Yeah. Hopefully I can keep this brief because I have a lot that I think about it, but I'll try to sum it up. Essentially, for me, woke is this idea of making sure you are aware of the context around you, your surroundings, in the context of social justice. So the isms that we often talk about, but it's not confined to just the social justice construct. But I will tell you that in researching it prior to talking to you, the other definition that I'm wrapping my head around that my significant other and I have been talking about is this idea that actually, there's out on the internet, a lot of people are doing videos or podcasts like us saying that woke kind of originated with Black people. And I would say that in doing further research, I don't think it really did. I think we as Black people may have taken and tried to popularize it or morphed it. But when I do more research on it or go a layer deeper, it actually is a metaphysical term also that for centuries has related to our what mysticists and others will call the third eye, right? And so essentially that is simply just again trying to see things on a deeper level, trying to see things for truly what they are. So I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I like that. And what I found in my research was that it did originate with Black people, actually with Huddle, Lead Belly, Ledbetter, or Lead Belly, Ledbetter.
Yeah, I did see
in like 85 years ago. And I rely on the one person who gives me all my information about being Black is Michael Harriot at the Griot. So if he says, an author of Black AF, if he says that's what happens or happened, that's what happened. He could be.
Hey man, you and I are both believers in you can have multiple truths in some instances, right? Depending on how you look at things. So yeah, I accept your definition and its etymology.
Well, and I also agree with everything that you said around it. I don't know if you saw this it's not a meme, it's just it's a post that's been going around, and it's called Woke Mob. And it's defined as a large, well-informed group of people with basic empathy who are compassionate, committed to dismantling injustices and making the world a better place for all humankind. I kind of like that.
I love that. That would be I subscribe to all those tenets. I haven't seen that meme, but I love that.
Well, I would say that then I am woke, but then Mr. Harriot says white people can't say they're woke, so I'm not going to say it.
You can say it.
I'm woke as AF.
You are, right? You woke AF, my friend.
No.
I will. I will honorarily designate you as woke.
Well, thank you. But I like the whole idea of staying awake, and watching your environment. And when I think about it regarding the work that we do and regarding group identities, for me, I think it can also connect to privilege. So whether that's white privilege, male privilege, ability privilege, whatever that is, because I know for me, I don't walk around being awake enough to see some things, that could hurt me or could be a barrier for me.
Yeah.
So that's how I also think about it, is connecting to the idea of privilege. And again, it's not that I did anything for that, but it's the fact that it's just the way things are set up.
Well, and I think as you say that, it spurred for me the idea of also being awake to see differing lived experience. Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's part of it from an ally perspective,
Yeah.
to be able to see and acknowledge, honor, have empathy for, as was used in the definition, that there are differing lived experiences that are
Yeah.
based on group membership sometimes. So I think that part of the wokeness does allow all of us across the ally spectrum, but certainly you as a white ally, to be able to claim this word, in my opinion, although I still do love Michael Harriot. So we just may agree on,
Yeah.
we may agree to disagree on this one.
Yeah. Well, I like that connection to allyship. And we learned this skill called tracking,
Yep.
which was created by the Elsie Wright Qual. I always have a hard time saying that. Elsie Y. Cross and
Cross. Yes.
Associates, years ago, and we were trained on it. And it's basically observing your environment, and
Mm-hmm.
observing group identities without putting your judgment into it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, talking about being awake and woke as an ally is to look around and get information
Yeah.
about some patterns of behaviors. So then you enter the conversation across a difference, and you're not starting from scratch.
Yep.
Or you can get that information individually, then you can go research it on this thing called the Google, and that will give you more information. And I say all that because as allies, we should be going into those conversations with some level of knowledge,
Yeah.
so that the burden isn't always on the other.
Yeah.
So I like that connect to that you're putting out there around allyship and being awake that way.
No, yeah, I appreciate that. So question for you though, and I'm in an interesting position because of my corporate role, but as a consultant, man, what are you seeing around the idea of this growing movement for or against woke, or how are you seeing just woke generally with your clients or in the corporate market?
Yeah, good question. For those that may not be awake, and paying attention to some of the national and state and local politics, is that there is this anti-wokeness um, push. And I'll name it as conservative groups and Republicans, whether in Florida or in Texas. I don't want to get too political here, but that's just a fact.
Understood.
That's just a
Understood.
fact, right? The
Yeah.
fact is,
Yeah.
is that they are. I mean, the governor of Florida passed the Stop Woke Act. So I say all that just because what I usually find with my clients is whatever's happening in society kind of shows up
Yeah.
within the companies, and I'm not seeing that much of it. Um, but over the past couple of years, I have seen it start to show up when I was doing white men as allies,
Okay. Okay.
and that's where it was showing up. But it was, this also other term is politically correct or cancel culture.
Sure. Yeah.
So yeah, I think probably there are a number of white men, straight, cisgender, who um do see things changing to where it feels like we're becoming more and more politically correct, or we're
Yeah.
canceling out people because of something they may have said or done, whether yesterday or years ago.
Yeah.
So I know there's a lot of grappling with that, and my hope is that they will get to a level of being awake, so that they can critically think about the situation. I'll also say that it doesn't mean that progressives or Democrats haven't done some book banning.
Sure.
Theirs
Yeah.
is usually around books that include the N word or homophobia, things like that. I don't mean it to be a false equivalency, but I'm not saying that it's just one group. It's just that one group is the Republicans are being very proactive and aggressive.
Yeah.
And so So Clayton, if I had some clients who might be in academia, then I think I probably would answer it differently, because I think that's
Hmm.
where it's starting, is with schools, school districts, um, AP courses, advanced
Yeah.
courses. And teachers right now are wondering whether they can even talk about slavery.
Yeah.
So I know that feeds into it, but I haven't seen much of it. Have you noticed anything?
No, I have not seen much woke resistance in my community where I live the majority of the time from a work perspective, right? And not to say it's not there, but
Yeah.
I have not seen that form of resistance. I have heard people talk about cancel culture, which I
Mhm.
also think I love that tie that you made. Um, I think cancel culture has contextual limits.
Mm,
So, for example, if you're an artist that sells, music or
mm,
whatever, or movies to the populace,
mhm,
then there is something that I can do about a viewpoint that you have that I don't agree with, which means I'm not going to purchase your product. But I think
mm,
that um, certainly when we talk about microaggressions and things that don't rise to the level of just complete buffoonery, which is often what happens in the corporate world,
mm,
right? That because of the power dynamic, often there really isn't a cancel culture, right? Because
mm,
there really isn't a fear. If you're, my boss, Sean, two levels above me, and you say something that I think is kind of weird, I can tell you I think it's kind of weird, but I probably am not going to be able to get you fired for some
mm,
microaggression,
mm,
right? So
mhm,
I think it's a little bit of a red herring
mm,
in the corporate environment. Same as woke. I was asked what our organization is doing about some of the political things that are happening, and I think that my answer, while not satisfying, was that we're not mature enough yet in our
mm,
allyship journey as an organization to be proactively
mm,
saying things about certain political movements, and I
mm,
hope that we get there one day, but we're not there. So I think that what we have is a case of absence,
mm,
which I think then could lull people who are not awake into this false sense of,
mhm.
kind of there's no problem, or that we don't care, or that whatever, they can make up their own story, right? So
Yeah, I think that's what happens with insider groups or dominant group
yeah,
members,
yeah,
where we are asleep,
yes,
because we don't have to be awake,
yeah,
because we're not being impacted by these microaggressions or micro assaults or whatever.
yep,
Um, and so one of those first steps is to get awake. And as you know, as insider groups, when we become awake, that's where the resistance comes. So
mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm,
think part of you, to answer your question again, am I seeing it? My clients, I don't think, are at maturity level where they're going to see that resistance.
yeah,
I
gotcha,
mean, one of them is, and we saw that in some surveys, and there's some really legitimate reasons why the white men are struggling with this, and nervous about it and confused.
yeah,
Um, so I think resistance comes more when it gets more real and you become more awake,
absolutely, yeah, yeah,
and so there's
yeah,
that resistance, that is easier to deal with when you know it's there. And I think that's, talking about inclusion within DE and I think that's some work that we can do, and I know I can do a better job of, is creating the space where you can have that contradictory viewpoint or resistance, so then you can work through it, instead
yeah.
of being hidden. And I don't know if we always do a good job of holding space for those type of perspectives.
That's fair, right? Because it's so easy to go to judgment
Yeah.
around that perspective, right? Versus, to your point, holding space to help people work through it. And so I certainly know I can do better at doing that. So for our practitioner friends who listen to this, tip number one: hold space
Yeah.
for this resistance. And so I say that, and I know Sean will join me in this. I'm confident in giving a preamble, but I say that from the perspective of there are people that will come to you with resistance, and you know that it's rooted in good intent. And then
Yeah.
there are people that you will meet and encounter with resistance that it absolutely is not rooted in good intent. So what
Yeah.
I'm saying to you, and I think what we're both suggesting, is as much as you can, make time and space for those that are rooted in good intent.
Yeah.
For those that are not rooted in good intent, it is what it is, right? You can choose to join in and try and handle or deal with, tackle, entertain. But I would say that from an emotional energy perspective, your energy is far more usefully spent on those that enter with resistance, but again, with that good intent, with that curiosity to learn, with an open mind, right?
Yeah, man, that's so important.
Yeah.
Um, because call me naive, I do think insider groups are more. There's more of them that are just asleep.
Yeah.
And maybe they have good intentions at individual level. They do some individual stuff, but they haven't necessarily awakened to the problems at multiple levels, certainly at the national level or the systemic level. And then it starts to shift a bit, I think.
I mean, that's the hope, right? I mean, you've heard me
Yeah.
say before my view, my 80-20 view of people very broadly. And I know it's a little judgmental, but bear with me, right? I think there are 10% of people who, in the context of DEI, are going to be like, no matter what you do, it's not enough.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
Yes.
nothing you can do is going to repair the damage. And then I think that there are people on the other end of that continuum that are like, if you mention it, it's too much.
Right.
Right. Why are we talking about that? Right. And so I would rather, again, both of those polar ends of a continuum are valid points of view, but I would rather spend my time with the people in the middle.
Yeah.
Because I think if they have good intent, that they can be swayed. And if I think they can be swayed, then we can build in a world that is just more caring and empathetic and inclusive. Right.
Yeah. Wow. It makes me wonder when you think about the opposite ends, both of them are feeling some emotions, and they might be similar emotions for different reasons. That's
Yeah.
what I think
Yeah.
about. What are the emotions behind that person that doesn't want to see D and I don't think we should be looking at differences, and it should go away. And then on the other side, that person that's so fed up, that outsider group member is so fed up with having to deal with crap every day, you know. So I often lean to that side where, yeah, things are have been created that are barriers, and I want to help remove those barriers. But I also know that some of my work is to hear some of the concerns, some of the fears, some of the feelings from those that are resisting.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
But that's
Yeah.
the hard part of the work.
It is, right? And but that's also, I think, why we are taught to be awake, to your point about what we were taught in our practitioner efforts. And to, again, relate this back to our corporate lives, I think that's also why a lot of initiatives fail, because they bring in people that have not been taught in some of these tools and tactics around how are you supposed to be as a practitioner, right? They bring someone in that is a minority themselves, right?
Right.
Or they bring someone in that was in marketing but just has a passion for diversity. And again, you need all of those things, right? We need Black people in senior leadership roles, or women or other ethnic minorities. We need people that have passion for this work, but this also is, at the end of the day, a change effort. Right. And so there are some skills that come along with being able to walk an organization through a change effort that go beyond just being from a minority group membership, or just having passion about this idea of having a more inclusive, workspace.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're all at different places,
Yeah.
with different skill sets. And my hope is that we've got a support network that helps to overcome some of those blind spots or weak areas that we need to develop.
Yeah.
So you had asked this question around how am I seeing it in my, with my clients, and I answered that. But I also, I just learned through my research about this, I just learned that there are more concerted efforts going towards certain corporations
Yeah.
have D&I, where these activist groups on the conservative side are actually becoming shareholder activists. So
Wow.
they're putting pressure on boards. They are going after things like quota or aspirational goals or program.
Wow. Yeah.
So on one level, I can understand why someone says, or a white person says, well, why do you have a black ERG and not a white ERG? I can
Yeah.
understand that confusion, and whatever else might come from that. And it's necessary. So there are some groups that are coming after that. And the final thing is that these groups are also filing or opening up investigations with the EOC. So they're
Fair
going
enough.
yeah, and we're talking about, I mean, the bigger brands,
Yeah. Yeah.
Starbucks, JP Morgan, and things like that. So which represents those that are really made a commitment to the work, and they've been doing it for years.
Yeah.
So I was surprised by that, and that makes me a bit nervous of how that could start showing up in some of the work.
That's fair. That's fair. I guess the Supreme Court is considering affirmative action too. So that might even lead to some changes in the EEOC policies and guidelines around how this work is conducted. But I would tell, again, all of our friends out there that do the work or are closely connected to it to stand fast, right? To not be moved by that sort of resistance. I think of the example of Northrop Grumman, who they were subpoenaed, or I guess not subpoenaed, but asked to provide all of their training materials around DEI to Senator Tom Cotton a couple of years back, right? And their reply simply was no. Right? A reiteration of, this is what we believe in. We don't have to give you anything. We're not going to kowtow or bow down to these, ridiculous requests. Now, and that's what I would consider as a corporate version of what I said earlier around this idea of good intent.
Yeah.
Right. Had you approached, Northrop Grumman with good intent, then I can absolutely see them turning over those materials and saying, hey, yeah, take a look at what we have. But when you approach them the way Senator Cotton did, then I applaud them and was so proud, even though I'm not an NG employee, but was so proud just to see their response of no. Right. Yeah. We're still committed. We're going to keep being committed, but no, we're not going to give you this because you don't have good intent around it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and again, this is stuff that's popping up in some corporations, will continue to pop up.
Yeah.
And I think there's a framework that Gartner has that that talks about pushback.
Yeah.
And I'll just maybe we share this with the listeners, but
yeah, we should link it.
Provided some ways to push back.
Nice.
And, one was to communicate to obtain buy-in. So it's a little bit about that, as I think about is how are you communicating in ways that this is an inclusive culture change?
Yes.
And try to enroll as many people as possible, as many insider group members as possible. So that was one part of it. The other was fostering empathy and building awareness. So again, I think you said the word empathy.
Yeah.
Awareness, quote, wokeness is really important to understand what you're seeing outside of yourself, but also inside of yourself.
Yeah.
And then it's to invite employees to engage DEI efforts. So that's probably kind of related to the ally piece as well.
Yeah, I love it, man. I'm glad that you brought that up, and we'll definitely link it out, dear listeners.
Yeah. So those are kind of the things that are out there. I think about those are some things for us to consider when we're in those spaces. Clayton, what would you say? You've already said it, but maybe summarize some of the things that individuals can do when they're running into this anti-wokeness, whether by friends or families or, the guy at the pop shop.
Well, I would say stay woke, right? I would say don't be on, not only. So that's the first step of stay woke. Second is engage, right? But engage respectfully, of course, right? I mean, you have, particularly with people that you have a vested interest in, be as respectful as you can. To your point, hear them out. You said that earlier, Sean. I'm saying it a little bit more directly, but I think I'm catching the essence of many of your comments, right? Hear them out, right? Understand what their anxieties might be, right? Empathize with them. All the things that you're wanting them to do for you, do for them as a role model in how to have these kinds of conversations. We also were taught having conversations across a significant difference as well in our practitioner training. And one of the hallmarks of that work is to name how you're feeling about something and don't name, what you think the other person's intentions were or what you think they meant by X, Y, and Z or what they're feeling, right?
Yeah.
So stick with how you're feeling on something. Stick with something that someone has said or done that impacts you. Stick with that impact. Describe that impact. Again, without the judgment. It isn't, hey, Uncle Larry, why'd you try to hurt me? It is, hey, Uncle Larry, you did X, Y, and Z. You made this statement. It impacted me in a certain way. It hurt me. I'd love to understand more about, why you thought that was a statement that you or why you chose to make that statement in that moment, right?
Yeah.
Something like that. So I think it is just it's hanging the game, man, and be empathetic, role model all the things that you want from that other person on an individual level. Again, if you're in a corner store and you get hit by a Karen that rolls in, right? I call those low stakes engagements. And so you might just choose to be like, you know what? This one I ain't gonna tackle. So that's the other thing. When you're woke, you don't have to tackle everything, right? You can still pick and choose your battles. So that's the last thing I'd leave people with.
Yeah. I won't add anything to that. I think that's a great list.
Awesome.
And hopefully people will grab 1 or 2 or 5 of those things and start practicing them or keep practicing them so they can get better at it.
Yep. I keep practicing. So we've been doing this 20 years, you longer than me, and I'm still practicing. So yes.
Me too. Every day.
Yeah,
every
exactly.
day.
That's why I love you, brother.
I love you, brother. And thanks for the conversation today. I'm feeling more awake. But after another bourbon, I'm not sure.
Hey, we're going to change this to bourbon and bowl conversations.
We might have to. We might have to. All right. Take care, brother.